It is the Martha Zoller Show, and joining me right now is Brian Brenberg. He has been with Fox News as a contributor since 2020. He provides financial commentary. He's one of the co-hosts on Fox Business's The Big Money Show, which is weekdays at 1 o'clock. But also, he's been on faculty at King's College. He is the chair of the program in business and finance, and we won't hold this against him. He's a double degree holder from Harvard University, an MBA and MPA. Brian, welcome to the program.
Hey, Martha, why did you have to mention that last part? It's just not a convenient time to have that attached to my name.
You know, my cousin went to Harvard and was actually on the ROTC program on the other campus because, you know, they don't do ROTC. And he kind of had he loved the education he got at Harvard, but he's disappointed in the direction they're going in.
Yeah, it's kind of the same for me. I mean, it's a great experience back when I did it. For a small town kid who'd never been in an environment like that, my eyes were open. I learned a ton. But no, the campus environment now just doesn't seem to be conducive, you know, asking questions about what's going on in the world, having open conversation and you know, and having kind of a moral compass too. So I grieve it as an alum, but you know, what are you going to do? I had a good experience.
Well, I loved, I've followed your career, and then I saw this piece you did called about embracing diversity. And, you know, diversity sometimes, because people think of it in the terms of DEI, is a word that gets people's interest, right? But what you were talking about was diversity, and that the fact we have this great diversity really opens up opportunity for merit and this whole discussion around equity, which you can never get equal outcomes. You're
right.
never going to get equal outcomes. The only thing you can do is make sure that the playing field is fair so that people can do the best that they can.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, this is sort of counterintuitive for everyone who really embraces all this equity stuff. But the way you get the most real, genuine diversity in the world is focus on equality of opportunity. Instead of trying to pre-plan who's going to fit into each bucket and who you want to help get ahead, you say, look, we want an even playing field. We want to let people try things. We want entrepreneurs to emerge. I mean, that's where you get, you know, the most diversity that's ever been created in the world has been on the basis of entrepreneurship, people trying new ideas and expanding our horizons. So, yeah, it's kind of, in this moment, it's kind of frustrating because I'm a huge fan of different ideas of people on the margins getting a chance to prove their worth, but you can't do that by creating all of these buckets and then saying only this kind of person can go in this bucket and only this kind of person can go in this bucket. I mean, come on. The world can predict the future. Certainly I can't. I don't think anybody in government can. So focus on creating more opportunity and let people show you what might surprise them and what might surprise you as well. That's the real meaning of diversity.
Well, and you're a financial expert, but also it's hard not to underplay the cultural side of this because we live in this world where capitalism, I believe, is the best way to lift more people up. Capitalism kind of needs a moral foundation or else it's just greed. But also we're living in this world where people are a little more risk averse, which isn't good for capitalism. And we also live in a world where we don't let people make mistakes. Do you know what I mean? So by not having everybody do everything they can to cover up their mistakes, and we're a little afraid of risk, we need to get rid of that and reinvigorate capitalism.
Oh absolutely. Yes, we have this stupid idea that the only place you learn is in a classroom. And we've made these classrooms into places where everybody has to feel good and everybody has to pass with an A and nobody can be held accountable to, you know, show up for class or do their work. And anybody who's, you know, lived a decent portion of their life knows actually the places where you learn the most were out in the real world doing things that weren't always quote unquote safe and where you could fail. And in the failures, in things that didn't work out, you tend to learn a lot about who you are and what it takes to make it in the world and maybe ways that you've got to improve. So I am with you. I am so tired of trying to insulate everybody from failure. I'm so tired of not holding not respecting people enough to hold them accountable for the decisions they make. Because, yeah, like as a human, I want to be respected enough to be held accountable for the decisions I make, including the stupid ones, so I can learn from them.
That's
I
right.
think the worst place is in student debt relief, student debt handouts. This idea that young people who are adults are taking on debt, and I understand they may not know what they're getting into, but they are adults. It's time to learn that. If you take on debt to go to a school, one of the best educations you're going to get is paying that back, because it'll teach you about all the other kinds of debt you could take on in your life someday: credit card debt, home loan debt, auto debt. We're pulling that rug out from under younger generations by telling them, oh, don't worry about it, we'll forgive that debt. Capitalism cannot survive if we do not respect the obligation to pay people back who we borrowed from. Capitalism cannot survive. The only thing that can work in that environment is socialism trending to communism. And that has going back to your first question, that's never been a recipe for real diversity, real entrepreneurship, and certainly real prosperity.
So, a couple of things that are in the news today. The first one, this big merger between Capital and Discover, I think, but
Yep.
it's a huge. It makes me a little nervous because it sounds a little bit like some of the things leading up the 2008 crash. And I know we're not there, okay, but make me feel better about that. I'm a little nervous about this big merger.
Okay, so I'll tell you, I'm not as nervous about the big merger. I understand the business reasons. Capital One, all the Capital One credit cards are all Visa, MasterCard branded cards. So Capital One has to piggyback essentially on the people they like to compete with. They're buying Discover because they don't want to do that anymore. They want to have, or they don't want to do that as much. Discover has its own credit card network working with retailers. Capital One wants that network. So from a business standpoint, I'm not worried about it. I think it probably makes sense for Capital One. But here's where I do agree with you on the worry. Credit card debt in America is rising to very high levels, record high levels. Again, delinquencies on credit cards are now increasing at a faster rate. The interest that Americans are paying on credit cards is hitting very high levels because the interest rates are very high. Martha, if you want to find like the spot where you start to get a little nervous, I wouldn't find it in Capital One, hitching up with Discover. I would find it in the fact that more and more Americans are having to go to their credit card to pay for the things you should not be buying on credit card, like your groceries.
Right.
And to me, that's where you have the potential debt bomb, a stressed consumer that can't make their payments. And that's when you could start to see a credit crunch that, would it look as bad as 2008? I hope not. And I'm not predicting that, but that's where I think the potential seed of a problem really is.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm old enough to remember when you could deduct your credit card interest. Okay, I'm dating myself a little bit there, but I was very young and early working at that time, and when they took that away, that was the best thing that ever happened to me, because once I couldn't deduct that interest, I was like, what am I paying this interest for? And I got into a habit of paying my cards off every month, and I've stayed in that habit. And so it doesn't matter to me what interest rates are on credit cards. I'm more interested in the perks, right? Because I'm going to pay it off every month anyway. So it works out fine. But final question. We had this Trump case that just happened where he got the $300 and some million judgment against him. And, there's already lots of problems with people not wanting to go to New York right now. I mean, I love New York. My dad was a New Yorker. We used to go there all the time on vacation. I take my children there once a year. I love New York. But I'm concerned about New York right now. And now we're telling business people you might get a $300 million fine.
Yeah, it's funny, Martha. I'm looking out the window of my office, and it's surrounded by these amazing skyscrapers in New York City, the buildings that define this city. And in a place where a judge, without a jury, really without any precedent, and no victim in the case, literally no victim in the case, can say, you are on the hook, sir, for $355 million, and you're barred from run or being a director in a company in this state for 3 years, these buildings will not be built. People will not buy them. People will not operate them if you're living under that kind of cloud. And you can say, well, it's just because it's Donald Trump. And that may be true today, but you don't know who the next it's just because of X is, right? Who's going to be the next person who falls out of political favor in this city for saying the wrong thing, believing the wrong thing, and all of a sudden they've got some judge coming after them basically without any constraints on the penalties that he or she can impose. So yes, this is a much bigger case than Donald Trump. It's a big case for the city, which I live in. I've lived in for 15 years. I want to see it thrive, Martha, but it absolutely cannot thrive as a commercial capital of America if the rule of law essentially has been undermined by ideological, progressive attorneys general, DAs, judges.
Brian Brenberg, he has a very fun Twitter feed that you should follow at Brian Brenberg. He also can be found on all the Fox News sites, and appreciate you being with us today. Thank you.